During the golden age of Spain, Hasdai ibn Shaprut wrote a letter in Hebrew to the king of the Khazars, Joseph, around 950 to 960 CE. He had heard of a Jewish kingdom called Khazaria, about 15 days' sea journey from Constantinople. He described his own land, Sfarad, and the king who ruled it, Abd er-Rahman, and then asked about Khazaria. What is your state? What is the name of your land? What tribes inhabit it? What is the government? How kings succeed each other, etc. He wondered whether they had descended from the 10 lost tribes of Israel. The Khazars, a nomadic people of Turkic stock, had come to the Volga-Caucasus region from Central Asia no later than the 500s of the Common Era, and had fought 2 wars with the Muslims in the 600s. Joseph wrote back, "The Khazars were once pagans until a king named Bulan, a wise and God-fearing man, expelled the wizards and all idolaters from the land and trusted in God alone. He investigated Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, and concluded that Judaism is the most reasonable." But in 965 of the Common Era, Russians from Kiev, who perceived a threat in Joseph's letter, invaded the empire, sacking the city of Atil. Khazaria appealed to its Islamic neighbors, but the condition for help would be conversion to Islam. Khazaria converted, but its empire was nonetheless destroyed by Polovsky nomads. Khazaria mysteriously vanished. And that brings us to a serious issue. It was charged some decades ago by Pulitzer Prize-winning author Arthur Koestler that they didn't just vanish, they migrated to Poland and other parts of continental Europe, bringing their Judaism with them and becoming the great bulk of Ashkenazi Jewry down to the present day. In other words, European Jews aren't ethnically Israelites at all. They're the offspring of Khazarians. The debate rages to the present, with recent genetic research being used to support the notion that Ashkenazi Jews have no roots in ancient Israel, but in medieval Khazaria. The proverbial plot thickens. Interestingly enough, the famed medieval Jewish poet Judah Halevi, who lived from around 1085 to 1140 CE, incorporated the story of Khazaria into a philosophical dialogue in Arabic. Kitab al-Hujja wal-Dalil fi Nasr al-Din al-Dalil, the book of argument and proof in defense of the despised faith, known in Hebrew as Sefer al-Kuzari. The rabbi in the book speaks for Halevi, saying that the life of a Jew can only be complete in Israel. It's what can be called nascent Zionism. The book reveals a deep awareness of the vulnerability of Spanish Jews. Upon completion, Halevi journeyed to Israel himself. Legend has it that he was killed by an Arab after reaching Jerusalem, a melancholy footnote to his nascent Zionism. But the idea that an entire kingdom would convert to Judaism stirred the hearts of a people who felt incomplete. It was a proto-Zionist longing. Consider Halevi's poetry. ליבי במזרח ואנוכי בסוף מערב, איך אטמא את אשר אוכל ואיך יערב, איכה אשלם נדרי ואסרי בעוד ציון בחבל אדום ואני בחבל ערב. יקל בעיניי עזוב כל טוב ספרד, כמו יקר בעיניי רעות עפרות דביר נחרב. Importantly, Judah Halevi foreshadowed the philosophy of Zionism and Jewish nationalism. Halevi's Ode to Zion declares, חיי נשמות אוויר ארצך, וממר דרור אבקת עפרך, נופת צוף נהרייך, ינעם לנפשי הלוך ארום ויחף, עלי חרבות שממה אשר היו דבירייך. ממקום ארונך אשר נגנז, ובמקום קרובייך אשר שכנו חדרי חדרייך. Halevi had good reason to look east, for the Cordoba Caliphate declined in the 11th century, and Muslim Spain suffered political fragmentation. It proved to be a boon for Jews in the short run, since they provided scribes, scholars, doctors, financial advisors. But it was costly over the long haul, as whole communities were uprooted when a prince was toppled. Political upheavals indeed cast a shadow over Jewish notables of the Golden Age. The Berbers, an ethnic group indigenous to northwest Africa, conquered Cordoba in 1013 CE. One of the Jews who fled was Samuel ibn Nagrela, aka Shmuel Hanagid, who lived from 993 to 1056 CE. He was brought to the court of Granada, where he held the posts of tax collector, secretary, and assistant vizier to the Berber king. He even led a Berber army into battle in 1038 CE. He also compiled a manual of Jewish law to make Spanish Jewry fully independent of the Geonim in Babylonia. And he was a Hebrew poet who patronized other poets, such as Solomon ibn Gabirol, who lived from 1020 to 1057 CE. Ibn Gabirol adapted many Arab motifs and stories into Hebrew, becoming a major religious poet of Spanish Jewry. Some critics charged that he was consumed by self-pity and what some have called arrogant swagger. Yet here is one of his better tidbits, a prayer. Shacharticha b'chol shachari v'nishpi, ופרסתי לך כפיי ואפי, לך אהמה בלב צמא ואדמה, לדל שואל עלי פתחי וסיפי, מרומות לא יכילוך לשבטך, ואולם יש מקומך תוך סעיפי. אני על כן אהודה שם אדוני, בעוד נשמת אלוהים Chai be'api. After the death of Shmuel Hanagid, things only got worse. A massacre of Granada's Jews occurred on December 31st, 1066. The Jewish quarter of the city was ransacked in what became the first case of persecution of Spanish Jews. What say ye, Watson? Should this incident be considered an aberration? or perhaps as indicative of a growing intolerance in Islam. Does this change our picture of Jewish life under Islam? How should we evaluate the comparative levels of intolerance and violence in Christian versus Islamic cultures, all the way down to the present day? Something to chew on, don't you think? Persecution, of course, produces refugees, one of whom was the great Jewish poet and philosopher Abraham ibn Ezra, who lived from 1089 to 1164. He left Spain before 1140 to escape the fanatical new regime of the Almohads, a Berber caliphate. He became a wanderer, and it was during this self-chosen exile that he wrote his most brilliant works. His most famous was his commentary on the Bible, concentrating on the grammar and literal meaning of the text. Scholars suspect that Ibn Ezra didn't actually believe that the Torah was written by Moses on Mount Sinai. Instead, he found seams and grammatical problems that indicated that it was written over a period of time. Of course, he didn't dare to proclaim this openly, as it would have meant his death. But there are hints of his suspicions within his commentary. Which brings us to Moses ben Maimon, Maimonides, who lived from 1135 to 1204 CE. Like so many refugees, he fled from Cordoba through Spain and Provence to Morocco. He in turn fled Morocco in 1165 due to persecution. He spent 5 months in Akko on the coast of Palestine, then headed south to Jerusalem and Hebron and on to Egypt. He stayed briefly in Alexandria, then settled in Fustat, near today's Cairo, the capital of the Fatimid Caliphate. In Cairo, he found a well-organized Karaite community, which challenged his talents as a Talmudist. And he was certainly up to the challenge. His early years were his happiest. The success of his brother in the gem trade allowed him to devote full time to study and writing. In 1168, he produced his first work, a commentary on the Mishnah, or Pirush HaMishnah. It's a history of oral law and a comparison of Aristotelian and rabbinic ethics. But 5 years later, his brother died, and he never recovered. Worse still, he now had to earn a living. He declared, "Better to earn a few drachmas as a weaver or tailor or carpenter than to depend on an exarch for a license to be a rabbi." And so he became a physician. By 1185, he was court physician for the great Islamic ruler Saladin, who conquered Jerusalem from the Crusaders. He kept a tireless schedule through his mid-60s, juggling the burden of medical practice, the leadership of Cairo Jewry, and writing of medical treatises and religious works. "I dwell at Fustat, and the Sultan resides at Cairo. My duties to the Sultan are very heavy. I am obliged to visit him every day, early in the morning, and when he or any of his children or any of the inmates of his harem are indisposed. I dare not quit Cairo, but I must stay during the greater part of the day in the palace. It also frequently happens that one of the 2 royal officers falls sick, and I must attend to their healing. Hence, as a rule, I leave for Cairo very early in the day, and even if nothing unusual happens, I do not return to Fustat until the afternoon. Then I am almost dying with hunger. I find the antechamber filled with people, both Jews and Gentiles, nobles and common people, judges and bailiffs, friends and foes, a mixed multitude who await the time of my return. His Hebrew masterwork was Mishneh Torah, an attempt to codify and rationalize the Talmud with the commentaries of the Geonim. He actually claimed to make direct study of the Talmud unnecessary. It was basically an Aristotelian coup and a very great controversy. His claim: there are both common and disparate elements in Jewish beliefs. So in that sense, he belongs both to orthodoxy and ecumenicism. Like Saadia Gaon before him, he sought a union between faith and reason, revelation and humanism. In Aristotelian fashion, he even attempted to codify 13 principles of faith. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שהבורא יתברך שמו הוא בורא ומנהיג לכל הברואים. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שהבורא יתברך שמו הוא יחיד. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שהבורא יתברך שמו אינו גוף. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שהבורא יתברך שמו הוא ראשון והוא אחרון. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שהבורא יתברך שמו לא לבדו ראוי להתפלל. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שכל דברי הנביאים אמת. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שנבואת משה רבנו עליו השלום הייתה אמיתית, ושהוא היה אב לנביאים. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שכל התורה המצויה עתה בידינו היא הנתונה למשה רבנו עליו השלום. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שזאת התורה לא תהי מוחלפת. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שהבורא יתברך שמו יודע כל מעשי בני אדם. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שהבורא יתברך שמו גומל טוב לשומרי מצוותיו ומעניש לעוברי מצוותיו. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, ואף על פי שיתמהמה, עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שתהיה תחיית המתים. In 1190, Maimonides produced the Guide for the Perplexed in Arabic to harmonize reason and scripture. It's addressed to that religious man for whom the validity of our law has become established, but is troubled by certain equivocal, derivative, or ambiguous terms. Maimonides died on December 13th, 1204, whereupon 3 days of public mourning and fasting were declared in Jerusalem. He was buried in Tiberias, and his tomb is still there. It's been said, from Moses to Moses, none has risen like Moses. Yet, opposition to his writings and philosophy only grew during the early decades of the 13th century. In 1232, opponents openly challenged his opinions. The dispute spread through Provence and northern France, but his supporters gained the upper hand during the course of various bans and counterbans. Nachmanides, for his part, was conciliatory. When the sages of France threatened to excommunicate anyone who studied the Guide for the Perplexed. He wrote that they simply didn't understand the social circumstances in Spain and Provence where Catholics were persecuting the Jews. By the time the controversy subsided, Rabbi Asher ben Yechiel was disseminating in Spain the doctrines of the Hasidei Ashkenaz, a mystical doctrine competing with the influence of philosophy. In subsequent generations, the balance tilted in favor of the anti-rationalists. In Ashkenaz, that is Central Europe, a system developed in which critical aspects of faith were combined with a mystical outlook. Though small in number, these Hasidim, or pious ones, exerted great influence. They were motivated by a fear of sin, to live simply and strictly. Their doctrine was dual in nature, demanding toward self, but lenient toward Jewry as a whole. Their aim? To educate Jewry toward a moral life. They were a closed and select fraternity, headed by members of an aristocratic circle, including Rabbi Samuel HaChassid, his son, Rabbi Judah HaChassid, and a kinsman, Rabbi Eliezer ben Judah of Worms. Their teachings were collective, their main work called Sefer Hasidim. It was preoccupied with the manifestation of God in the universe, with the names of God and the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. It involved higher universes and spheres of being. The temporal world, so they said, is replete with demons and spirits. The dead, too, walk the earth and influence it. Moreover, the Jewish community consists of those in the graveyard as well as the living. At night, their souls come to pray in the synagogue, so that the living and the dead constitute one mystic body of Jewry in each location. Arguably, they were influenced by fears and superstitions coming from the German Christian movement, including monasticism and asceticism, that is, self-denial. Yet the Hasidim were limited in their asceticism because of family life and a Jewish ban on celibacy. So the nature of this influence is an open question. It's been said, nonetheless, that the very barrier between Jewish and Christian worlds was also their meeting place, and that this meeting place was the area of tension. The Hasidim produced their own commentaries, in which each letter is counted and numbered, representing the keys to the kingdom of heaven. They combined holy simplicity with radical criticism. They also felt that intellectual gifts don't always serve to a person's advantage, so scholarship among them diminished. At the same time, sexuality held an important place in Hasidic doctrine. The Hasidim frankly described the power of sexuality, its temptations and dangers. Heterosexual love was considered a positive and necessary part of family life. Yet martyrdom also held a central place in Hasidic thought. One more creative current of this period involves Talmudic exegesis, that is, legal discussions and the practical application of law, along with commentary on the Torah and the prophets. The compilers were called Tosafists. They originated among French Jews and spread throughout Ashkenaz, also influencing Spain. They produced Tosafot, or additions to earlier Talmudic commentaries. By the late 1200s, Muslim territory in Spain had been reduced to just Granada in the south. Some institutions in Christian Spain promoted centralized leadership, and the monarchy in Castile recognized the office of rabbi, el rab, or court rabbi, rab de la corte, recognized by the Jews as head of the Spanish exile, namely Rabbi Don Todros Halevi Abulafia. In 1354, Jewish community leaders in Aragon met for the purpose of interceding in all matters affecting the communities in the kingdom. They chose select men to prepare a budget and distribute the burden among the communities. In response to the riots of 1348, they said of the Christians, "With their lies and incontinence, they have brought false charges, in order that Jewry should indeed abandon the well of living water." It was said of those who withstood torture, "They have shown the strength to stand in the hall of trial." Those who converted were charged with being weak-hearted and soft by nature. All in all, the stage had been set for the most grueling ordeal of all, waiting in the wings of reconquered Christian Spain. The worst was yet to come.